Welcome to the groundbreaking news program that delves into the heart of Mormonism, your weekly window into the unique intersection of news, history, and culture that resonates with the tapestry of Mormonism. So whether you are tuning in from the heart of Utah or joining us from around the world, your favorite news program starts now, where news meets insight and the stories of our faith unfold. Did I do that right?
You did just fine there. Thank you so much, Brother Will Cox. And welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Mormon Newscast. Today's date is January 13th, 2025. I am Radio Free Mormon, and here is my associate, Mr. Bill Reel. Good evening, Mr. Reel.
How are you, Mr. Radio Free Mormon?
I am fine, thank you. As I understand it, you will be presiding at this newscast, and I will be conducting. Is that right?
I am not commenting on any of that. I told you before the show started that you were presiding and conducting. So,
all right. Well, very good. Then I can do anything I want, but we'll probably end up going along the slides as we have them set up.
Remember which direction you face.
Let me see. Let me see if I can add these to the stage. There we have it. Latter-day Surveys is the main story for this week. That will be handled by Mr. Reel. It's the top story. I don't seem to be able to maneuver these.
Try that one.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. You'll notice someone's missing, and that someone is Rebecca Biblioteca, and she's much missed. She had an emergency toothectomy, and so it's swollen, and she didn't feel up to coming on the show tonight. And that was this morning, for crying out loud. She suffered with this all weekend. I know, because I was checking in with her all through the weekend, and I couldn't believe she could still text and have such a good sense of humor about her when she was in such excruciating pain. Isn't that always what happens? It's going to be on a Friday when this happens, and so you can't get in till like Monday at the earliest if you're lucky, and she was. So hopefully she'll be doing better. I spoke with her briefly before the show. I understood every fifth word or so that she said, but I think she's on some medication, so she just needs a little time to heal.
Yeah. We wish you well, Rebecca, and hopefully we'll see you back here next week.
Yes. She said she would try and be in the live chat because she can type better than she can talk, she said. Top stories on today's show: Latter-day Surveys, LDS Church's handling of the Los Angeles wildfires, Elder Holland gives away the planet game, and American Primeval, fact or fiction. That first story, Latter-day Surveys, will be handled by our very own correspondent, Mr. Bill Reel.
All right. So let me just say here a couple of things. One is that I didn't know I was just going to run with this story, so I thought you and I would just work on this one together.
We'll work on it together. Absolutely.
Sweet. I'll take the lead on the conversation then, and I'll just note to the audience, we could have put the entire survey up. We felt like that would be risky. We might end up with the church, excuse my French, bitching and moaning again, and so we would end up with another copyright strike.
I can't believe you said moaning.
I know. Sorry. So I just want to note that I am putting up the questions that we specifically want to talk about under fair use. And so with that, we'll jump into these. So I took the questions off each.
By the way, Bill,
yes.
Bill, you were so interested in getting to the caveat, okay?
Yeah.
And I appreciate that as an attorney. I appreciate that. But yeah. I think we've overlooked explaining what the heck this is.
Let's do that. So if we go back a few days, there began to be rumblings on the internet that the church had sent out a survey. Now, from the believing perspective, these are prophets, seers, and revelators. They lead the church by revelation. They can ask God any question and get an answer, although sometimes 200 years can go by and we don't get the answer until way later. So in order to circumvent the revelatory process, because it doesn't seem to work super great, LDS leaders send out surveys to get the opinion and beliefs of members. This survey, whether it was intended to be public or private to only a select group of people, I don't know. What I do know happened is that immediately people began reporting that the survey had gone out and that anyone could get into it. And so by clicking the link, everyone could get into the survey. So all people could see it.
It was available on the church's website, wasn't it?
Yes, it is. It is a church survey that came from the church's website with their URL. Again, I've got the original images. I can confirm that the original church's URL address is at the head of it. These questions are, I think, telling, and our hope today was, because this is newsworthy, this is the big news that happened in Mormonism over the last week, that RFM and myself, that we would go through some of the questions that stand out and give our 2 cents about what it is maybe they're trying to get to, what it might be suggesting about the church, and if there are any problems or foreseeable issues with the questions as they stand. So on the very first set of questions, yes,
Bill,
sir.
can I add something there?
Please.
Because I'm not sure if you mentioned that it's no longer publicly available.
No.
Because what happens is it's made publicly available, word gets out as word does, and it just kind of lit a fire in the post-Mormon community. And everybody's talking about this and what it says, and there were strange questions. We'll get to those. And then after that happened, then all of a sudden it was no longer public. The church made it not public. And I have a theory behind that. Well, I'll share that with you later for whatever it's worth. Bottom line is I think heads are going to roll over this one. But now let's get to these strange questions that they have. And these are not all the questions. We're not replicating the slides, right, Bill?
No, we're not replicating the slides. We are showing parts of them as pertinent, because you can't show an entire project. It's a gray area, sort of, because you can create an extended project from it. But just a quick note for fair use: if you show an entire project, the entity that owns copyright to it can make the argument that you're violating that. But as a journalistic entity, and as an entity that is often trying to expose or shine a light on things, we certainly have the right to fair use. And what we did was take the questions that seem the most problematic, and those are the ones that we're showing you today. So on this very first slide is the very first set of questions that the survey asked. By the way, there was a report maybe a few days ago in one of the other shows we did where somebody noted, and it might have been Nathan Hinckley, I think, that noted that very different people got different versions of the questions. So we in no way suggest that this is the only survey that went out that day. There may be variations of this survey. The LDS Church would have the capability, if it sends out a survey and it collects answers and it surveys sort of the same people over and over, it could start to categorize how people that tend to answer questions the way doubting Mormons or post-Mormons would answer could get funneled to a different survey. They could funnel surveys based on gender. And so I don't know if there was one survey or multiple surveys. I just know this is one of the surveys for sure. And so with that, here are the ones, this was the ones in the first page that I thought were problematic or at least deserve some discussion. And almost all of the survey was, please mark whether you do or do not believe in each of the statements. And you could say, I do, I believe, I do not believe, and you could say, I don't know, too. There was a third answer. And then there was also, in a lot of the questions, and you'll see the way it's framed in other slides, but one of the other things that happened was it would say, do you agree with or disagree with? And it also left a third answer that was sort of neutral or abstaining from a point of view. But in this one, please mark whether you do or do not believe each of the following statements about.
And I want to answer as the Mormon I was.
A woman who gets an education is rejecting her role in the family.
No, I do not believe the statement.
Yeah, because the church does encourage women to get an education, but solely to be used as a mother and a nurturer in the home unless an emergency happens.
Well, to get them together with the males who are pursuing their higher education so they can get their MRS degree. And if they have the good fortune to get their MRS degree before they get their BA degree or BS degree, then any education that they have is supposed to be used in the case of their kids or if their husband meets an untimely end.
Yeah. And my point being is that while they're asking a question that every Mormon and post-Mormon should generally answer this way, they fail to ask the question that would actually get a difference of opinion based on who was taught what in the past and who is taught what in the present.
Well, maybe the second question comes closer to that.
It does come closer, although not exactly it. It says it is equally important to educate girls and to educate boys.
And then the Mormon that I was thinks about it and has to say, in truth, no, I don't believe that.
No, correct.
See our discussion above.
Yep. And then the third one, after a woman gets married, she accesses God through her husband, not directly. Now, this is obviously a reference, at least in part, to the temple where the women would promise obedience to their husbands as their husbands promised obedience to God. And that's been done away with. So I think Mormons in the past might feel one way about that question, and Mormons in the present might feel another. Your thoughts?
There's three questions here that have to do with, well, the role of women and their equality or inequality with men. Okay. Two on education, one in the temple or spiritual or whatever you'd say about that. And I'm wondering first off, let's go back to the insight you had last Friday and that Rebecca actually shared with me independently on the phone before this, which is if you have a survey, it means you're willing to change. Remember when you said that?
Yeah.
And I said, wow, absolutely brilliant. If you have a survey, it means you're willing to change. So if you're willing to change on these three issues, I mean, what is the church thinking? Is it trying to see how many people they know they've got a problem with the conservatives versus the more liberal side of the Mormon church-going spectrum, all right? They know they got problems on both sides. Are they trying to figure out how big one side is versus the other? Are they trying to get a handle on what the percentages are? I don't know. And there doesn't have to be just one answer for this survey. It could be pursuing multiple ends. And what I think probably happened is that this survey is going to be useful only if it is sent to people who are TBMs. If you have a bunch of non-TBMs weighing in and throwing things off, this is all going to be wasted effort. I expect that a lot of time and a lot of money was put into conceptualizing this survey, and for whatever reasons it's for, to get it ready to go. And then some Einstein, when they rolled it out, hit public instead of sending it out to people that they've identified as being more likely to be active Mormons.
Yeah, I think it's 100% correct. And I'll also say there could be, you noted, there could be multiple purposes in this. One purpose they could convey through something like this is if we approach history, doctrine, the behavior of leaders with obfuscation, for instance, the 1978 race ban is done away in 1978, mildly distanced from with some sort of encouragement to trust a modern prophet with Bruce R. McConkie there at the BYU speech. Then in 2013, the Gospel Topic essay comes out disavowing those past teachings. And then Oak says his thing at the B1 conference. They could, because later questions do with race. And all of these issues are things that the church has shifted on somewhat significantly since its inception. And all of these questions are getting to that. So if you take out the specific topic, the general thing going on here is, what do our members think about things that used to be taught differently in the past and are taught another way today? They could be evaluating if the obfuscation is effective enough that it distances them from accountability, but that over time members are learning the new thing. Does that make sense too?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think there might be a part of that to this, because the general consensus is how well are you guys all handling all of our changes?
By the way, okay, great point. I also put myself in the shoes of a TBM who is receiving this being sent out by the church. And I would be confused if I'm a TBM getting a survey that's asking me what I think about issues that I look to the church leaders to tell me what I believe about these issues. Why would you care what I believe? What could be less relevant in the Mormon church than what a member believes being expressed to the church echelons, higher echelons, through means of a survey? The first thing I would think is, okay, why are you asking me this? Shouldn't I be asking you? And then the second thought that would hit me is, oh, wait a second. That's not what's going on. What's going on is that they're trying to figure out who has the right answers on all of these different questions, who has listened, who has gotten the memo from the brethren about the right answers, so they can see, okay, almost everybody gets this right. A lot of people getting this wrong. We need to focus on this over here and talk more about that and clarify that. That's where I would go to as a TBM, answer number one, and then answer number two.
Yep. And so if we move here to the next one, for instance, the next one, these were the questions that caught my eye. Getting married in the temple for eternity is a commandment. I'm sorry, they're a little faded. That's the way they were on the image. Getting married in the temple for eternity is a commandment.
Yes.
Of
Of course it is.
But that's my point, RFM. They're asking the obvious.
Yeah. So why are they doing that?
Unless they're willing to walk back and allow it to be some special ordinance in the gospel, but not
Gay marriage.
Yeah.
This is about gay marriage. Sorry
Very
for being slow on the uptake, everybody.
Yep.
Yeah. If it's not a commandment, then it can, well, what happens if it's not a commandment? That's what I want to know. Vis-a-vis the gay membership, right? Are you saying that's a reason that they can get married in the temple because it's not a commandment anymore? Or is that a reason to say it's no big deal that you can't go to the temple because it's not a commandment? Is it a basis to stop discrimination or to encourage it and give an excuse for it? Perpetuate it.
Yeah, and I also want to acknowledge that in surveys like this, it's also possible for them to ask a whole host of questions for which they don't care about the answer, but then to vary within the survey to 1 to 5 questions that they really do want the answer to.
Right.
So that could be part of this as well. But that seems so obvious. And then the next set of them, it said having children is a commandment. Imagine a world where Latter-day Saints are safe to go. Having children is not a commandment. It's not necessary to multiply and replenish the earth.
It's the first commandment or the second. It's one of the first.
Yeah.
It's so early. It's before the 10.
Yeah. And yes. And then having a lot of children. Yes. You mean chronologically multiplying
the earth. It's like the negative number 3 commandment.
Yeah. Because don't forget, obedience is the first law of heaven.
Oh, absolutely.
So then they ask, having a lot of children is a commandment.
Yes.
That's
what spirits up there. They're waiting.
Yep. So again, they're asking questions for which there's really no reason to even ask the question unless A, your members have collectively gone rogue and no longer believe what you tell them, or B, you're about to shift rhetoric if the results of the survey are cited in a way that would deem you to need to change.
Well, Elder Anderson, Neil Anderson, you'll recall, is the one who 2 separate times in 2 different general conferences over the course of not that many years has visited this theme of women who are too old to bear children, or it's dangerous to bear children, or their doctor tells them they shouldn't bear children, and they end up getting pregnant and they go through with it and everything's great and they're blessed. He does that. He doesn't talk about the other people who follow that counsel and end up with results that are not so happy.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's what they're teaching today. All I'm saying is I can attest to that.
Yeah. And then you've got God loves his daughters, but not his sons. Can you imagine anywhere in the world where any Mormon on any side of belief would answer that I believe God loves his daughters, but not his sons, or the opposite, which they also...
No, because we all know he loves his sons best.
Yes, but also church rhetoric sort of puts women up on a fake pedestal. And I think the average believer, the average non-believer would both insist that to whatever degree they believe in God, God loves all of his children equally.
I think we would have to say that, even if we have to suppress a smile in doing so, because obviously he loves his boys better than his girls, because we get all the powers.
Yes. Okay, next one. Marrying in the temple for eternity is so important that it is better to stay single than to marry for this life only.
Yes, exclamation point. End of sentence. That is what we were taught when I joined the church. And Spencer Kimball was the president, and he taught it.
Have you heard anywhere in the church the message in official channels of some sort or another, general conference, curriculum, magazines, where the church suggests to its single members to marry outside of the faith as a way to solve not being single? I don't think
Have
so.
I ever heard of that?
Yeah.
No, I've never heard of that.
I don't think that message has ever been given. And I would love if there is a place where the message has been given to, like, hey, go get married. Don't stay single just waiting for a Latter-day Saint. I don't think the leadership has ever given that message.
I don't recall it.
Yeah. And then the other one, all good people.
This is an absolutely never heard this.
Yep. And so you're
I'm sorry. I thought I was just doing it beforehand, before you read it.
Oh, I got you. All good people will have eternal families, even if they choose to marry only for this life. No way.
Not happening. Section 132 forbids it explicitly.
Yeah.
And is it verse 19 and again in verse 26 or something like that?
Yeah.
And those are long verses.
It does seem like the church is at least thinking about ways in which it could separate the temple from exaltation. Does that make sense? Like they're asking,
sure pouring a lot of money into something that isn't essential to exaltation.
Yeah. So that seems strange.
It seems very strange. I mean, I can tell you unequivocally what the answer was 45 years ago in this church.
Right.
By the way, have I said any answer that was different from your answer, Bill? Because
No.
you joined the church after me.
No, every one of the answers are the answer I would have given when I was in my TBM days as well.
Okay.
Yep.
But what all good people, yeah. Why are they asking the question? I don't know.
Yep. So there's those
cereal?
two.
Is it fluff? Or is it something that the church is thinking about shifting on?
Rebecca says, I think I said this on the newscast before that the church needs to be upfront and let people know that they should look for a good person to marry. Doesn't have to be a temple marriage. Yeah.
Oh, that's Rebecca's version of I told you so.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Okay. So
She called it.
Yep. In the next set, there were these four that stood out to me, maybe five here. So sometimes a male spirit. So here's the transgender and LGBT section. Sometimes a male spirit is placed in a female body, and sometimes a female spirit is placed in a male body. They are aging. Oh, go ahead.
It is so hard to get good help.
Yeah, they could write things.
I mean, who's in charge of this anyway?
Yeah.
Heads are going to roll.
It's obvious they're asking members whether they are coming around to the world's opinion about transgender individuals.
And I'm sorry, I'm not laughing about the issue. I'm just laughing about the image it evokes in my head that I used to quite sincerely believe that somebody's in charge of putting little boy spirits in boy bodies, and somebody else is in charge of putting little girl, probably the girl spirits are in charge of that, putting the girl spirits in the girl bodies, right? And somebody goofed up. I don't know.
And whoever it is that goofs up, they never replace them, because we know that because, again, over time, we'll figure this out with, for instance, gay folks. But there's a certain percentage. There's a certain percentage of penguins that have been gay for 1 million years. There's a certain percentage of koala bears that are gay. And so
this problem is endemic in the premortal existence.
Yeah, whatever the quality assurance guarantee is of the angelic ministering servants who are taking care of things in the pre-earth life.
Yes.
If the church is right about these issues, there are people on the other side who are failing at their job.
Yeah. God's going to have to clean house. There's going to be another war in heaven.
Yeah. Well, we've gone at least the 200 years of having prophets, seers, and revelators on the earth, and God still lets the quality assurance folks on the other side keep doing the job, and they're failing at it.
Imagine how frustrating it must be to be God and be perfect in everything, and everybody's always disappointing you.
Yeah. All right. So there's that. Then there is it is a sin to feel attracted to others of the same gender.
The answer to that is it was in 1980, but it isn't today.
Yeah. And if you've already laid it out and you've been crystal clear because you're a faith that values truth and giving people the full story, shouldn't be that much confusion now. Every member of the church should have clearly heard the message about attraction and the choice of active gay lifestyle, of sleeping with someone of the same gender sexually. So,
Mr. Reel, I
yeah.
hope I don't offend anybody when I say this, but to the extent that you are correct, that there's certain questions that are really the heart of this, that they're really interested in, but they can't just ask these questions because then it would look like this is the only thing they're interested in. I think this might be it.
Yeah, this is the question. It is wrong to expect someone to live their entire lives without having sex.
By the way, when I said this might be it, I meant this cluster of questions relating to homosexuality.
That may be. There are other ones that I'm sort of caught on as well, and so we'll get to those. But it is wrong to expect someone to live their entire lives without having sex. I don't like the way this question's worded, and I'll tell you why. There are single members of the church who never have the opportunity and have to live their entire lives without sex. So, of course, any member understanding that, even thinking about the sort of minority group of those folks, is going to go, that doesn't make any sense. If you really want to know the answer to the question, you should have worded it better. But there's a part of me that grasps that the church asks the questions it does the way it does intentionally. It's meant to invoke certain kinds of answers from the crowd and not exactly get to the bottom of how someone really feels.
Right. I mean, why put it this way instead of saying what it is you're really getting at, which is it wrong to expect someone who's gay or lesbian to live their entire lives without having sex? That's really what you mean. And that would elicit the response that would really tell you what your respondent thinks. But when you put it in generalities, I mean, what does this mean? I don't know, because you probably get almost 100% if this was a Catholic survey.
Yeah. And nobody has a right to sex, but everybody has a right to pursue intimate relationships, at the very least, under the approval of whatever format you believe God has established.
Yes. And of course, I mean 100% that it's okay to expect someone to live their life as a celibate priest.
Right.
What's this next one?
God made a mistake when he made people who are gay. What is the church going to do if like 91% of members answer that in the affirmative?
You know, it's an interesting thing because this, as much as anything else I've seen in this survey, this is actually objectionable because it's argumentative. The question itself, which is a statement, framed as a statement, is argumentative, because what you're subtly saying is God doesn't make mistakes. We're all coming from this assumption. It's the TBMs who are getting this, right? So God didn't make a mistake when he made. You are forcing the person who is a believer to answer that as a no.
Yeah, because
God didn't make a mistake when he made people who are gay, right? So that actually ends up being a manipulation, I think, to yield a gay affirming answer. What do you think?
I think you can leave room that someone is challenged, right? I mean, that's sort of been the way that the church has, that God uniquely gave this person this challenge. And all of us are born into this world with lives of challenges that differ from the person next to us. And I think there's room for the believer to go, it's not a mistake, but he did make people who are gay. And that's just the challenge they've been given. I think that's an approach that I often made as a Mormon to these kinds of arguments. Not this one, but when people would ask me, why did I have this happen? Why did I lose my kid to this? Why was I born with this health issue? That's the way I was taught to approach it.
Bill, would you read this last one? And then I'll say something.
The church should seal same-sex couples in the temple. What? Whoa. No.
Of course, no. Hell no. That's the TBM response. But notice, this is in order. You didn't clip these out. These are actually in the order that they appeared in the survey.
Yep.
This is not a survey in terms of wanting to find out what people really think. This is a survey in terms of trying to manipulate your membership into giving the answers that you want them to give. The significant thing is that this is designed to lead toward allowing same-sex couples to be sealed in the temple. Why do I say that? Because look what leads up to it. The person getting the survey is being led down the garden path. It is a sin to feel attracted to others of the same gender. Well, no, it's not. It's wrong to expect someone to live their entire lives without having sex. Well, yes, it is. God made a mistake when he made people who are gay. Well, no, he didn't. The church should seal same-sex couples in the temple. Of course they should.
Yeah, and I'll just add that question. If you really wanted to know the answer, you would ask, would you be okay? Would you be pleased? Whatever it is, whatever way you want to word it, if the church started to allow same-sex couples into the temple. But you know what kind of firestorm that would have created if the question was asked that way. So this is sort of a back alley way of sort of getting to an answer that they can make some sort of use of, but which really isn't for fear or risk, I think, of upsetting people. It could not be asked in the most appropriate way.
You weren't going to say a backdoor way, were you, Bill?
I was, but I changed
maybe.
it. Yeah.
Moving
All right.
on.
Okay. So here we go. People with dark skin were not as faithful in the premortal life. Hell yeah, that's the truth. That's the truth. Take it to the bank.
Absolutely. You and me in the TBM days when we knew what the church taught and the church knew what it taught.
Yes.
People, they were not as faithful in premortal life. That's why they couldn't have the priesthood. Hello, McFly. But today, the person who gets this should be answering, hopefully by this point, no. In other words, the proposition that people with dark skin were not as faithful in premortal life is a no. I don't believe that.
Brigham Young initiated this and enforced it. Every prophet, seer, and revelator after him, they approved books to be sold through LDS channels, including what was it? Was it the Negro or the Mormon Negro?
Oh, I'm so sorry. What are you saying?
I'm saying that not only did Brigham Young initiate and enforce this,
yes,
every prophet, seer, and revelator afterward reiterated and enforced it. And they even approved materials that were sold through various LDS channels.
That the Mormon and the Negro?
Yes.
That was your question. I apologize. I was actually looking at these questions and they were evoking so much thought. I blocked you out for a second.
I'll
just focus on you now. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I'm just noting that this thing was taught by everyone and believed by everyone, and without any revelation, only because the world pushed back and the history became clearer. The modern church throws all of those people under the bus without anything from God to indicate he's the one who said to do that. Yeah.
Yes. Well, Bruce and McConkie came up with some tall tales.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the church's history with blacks and the priesthood shows that doctrine itself can change. To me, this is a big one. They're asking members if members believe that doctrine can change. That's different than thinking you have doctrine, but you're just teaching false ideas that are false and you just don't know they're false yet. This is that what was doctrine once can truly be a temporary commandment.
Or is it that they are trying to see how many people think that this episode shows that doctrine can change when they want to make it clear to them that it's not doctrine at all that's changing? Because as we all know, doctrine never changes, that this was simply a policy. Do they need to address that in some further way? Because this is obviously, this is the root of apostasy here. If doctrine can change, that means the leaders of the church, the prophets, can change what they say about doctrine. And if that's the case, then they become like a rudderless ship in a storm.
Yeah. How would you know whether the doctrine of the past was true or the doctrine of the present is true if they contradict each other?
That's a boat you would not want to stay in.
No, there's a little foreshadowing. All right. So, and then the last one here, it is a commandment to marry within your race. Now, again, there are still manuals that existed not too long ago. They might still exist with
Young men, young women's.
where they still implore the youth to marry within their own race. It's not articulated in the most unhealthy ways like it used to be, but still a teaching.
That might have been around 7 to 10 years ago. That was located and excised from the body politic.
But not far removed. And so it is a commandment to marry within your own race. So they are, by this question, you would sort of see who's still the old guard and who has come around and now views the church more in a present, like a present lens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So there's those. Then we've got one must enter into plural marriage, polygamy, in order to be exalted. This is the law of celestial marriage. This is an old one. I don't think any modern Mormon would answer this in the affirmative.
I don't think so either if they hadn't read section 132 closely, because that's kind of what it says.
Yeah, but any Mormon for the last 50 years, unless you're a fringe person who's sort of trying to practice polygamy secretly, or you belong to some other group, but you use your membership in the church to access the temple. There's ways in which the question could be designed for that, but I would guess that 99% of faithful believing Mormons would answer no to this.
I agree. By the way, and just to clarify, in section 132, I'm aware that it says that to whomsoever is given this law, you got to obey it. You can't just not obey it with impunity once it's given to you. So once the law is given to you, yeah, and it was getting given to more and more people, as you know, both in Nauvoo and then in Utah territory. So it was given to a lot of people. All I'm saying is that I had said that section 132 makes it applicable to everybody. Well, it makes it technically applicable to those to whom it's given. Okay, that's what that whole footnote is about. My apologies.
And then the second one, some people will be forced into plural marriage after mortality. They are gauging how much fear there is on, I would suggest highly the female perspective within believers in Mormonism of how afraid they are that polygamy might happen on the other side and they have to be forced into it.
It's an interesting thing, especially when you juxtapose it with that odd statement that Elder Oaks gave a few conferences ago about, you won't be forced into any plural marriage in heaven that you don't want to be, with the implication that it could even be your first husband, because he was talking mainly the sisters. I mean, that's who it mainly impacts, right? So you're saying, if you don't like your marriage, plural or non, in celestial kingdom, then you're not going to have to stay there.
Yeah,
I have no idea where he pulled this out of, except from an understanding that this is a concern that women have. So he's going to say it's like a free for all in heaven, and that's the Mormon Church talking.
Yep. And then I think the money question. This indicates how much of an effect people like Michelle Stone are having on the church, that the church, this would not have even made it as a question in a survey 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, for sure. This is a question designed in the last, say, 2 years, which is this growing group of people who believe that Joseph Smith had nothing to do with polygamy. So the question is, or the statement that they're asking for a response to, Joseph Smith did not institute plural marriage. It was initiated by Brigham Young without divine direction. Ooh. One wonders why they would be asking that question and what they want to do with the answer.
What indeed, Mr. Reel? This doesn't have, does this have to do with them changing history? Because if a survey signals that you're willing to change, and this statement appears to be exclusively about the church's history from 150, 180 years ago, are they willing to change their history? Is that what this signals?
You would think that would be absurd, that Mormonism would find a way. The LDS version of Mormonism would eventually come to a belief and a stated theological and historical point that Joseph Smith either didn't practice it, or if he did, he didn't do it with God's help. And it would even be harder for me to imagine that they would do so in a way that acknowledges Brigham Young is the one who did it without divine direction. That would open up so many cans of worms that would be problematic to the church's truth claims that it's hard to imagine they would consider going there. So then it seems like what they're doing is looking for the segment of Mormons who are beginning to get away from trusting the authorities and the church's history department on this issue and are being swayed by people like Michelle Stone.
Well, maybe Michelle could be the next General Relief Society president.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts on that one? Otherwise, I'll move to the next one.
Go get him, Michelle. Go ahead.
All right.
Oh, it's me now.
That's it. So we'll just finish off here. I think these questions are interesting. I think if you believe that the church is led by prophets who speak to God, these questions are interesting. If you have an orthodoxy that holds on to old time views and has watched the church change and you've gotten uncomfortable, I think this survey is interesting. And I think if you're wondering where the church might go in the next decade or two, Ben Spackman, I think this survey is interesting.
Mm-hmm. What does God need with a starship? What does a prophet need with a survey?
Right. Okay. If nothing else, my friend, it's on to you.
Thank you. Oh, the LDS Church's handling of the Los Angeles wildfires. Now, a number of us have seen pictures pop up on different social media platforms showing the LA Temple, which is here in the bottom right, and the fires behind them, and talking about the fact that the LA Temple still isn't burned and asking for prayers and such, because that is, of course, a proof that the LDS Church is true, because God is going to burn all of these people's homes and all these people and all these animals and all of these things, but he's not going to let that fire touch his holy temple. Now, you got to be careful when you go down this road, because if you're committed to that proposition, there are other things out there. And apparently there's, by the power of Allah, miracle in the midst of tragedy in the Los Angeles fire. Only this mosque is all that remains from the fire. So, of course, Islam is true.
I just want to say to the churches handling things this way, I still have people I know in LA who I've reached out to message to see if they're okay, and I have not heard back from them yet. And that makes me nervous. And I'll simply say, if you're suggesting that God protects the temple over the lives and property of thousands of people, you're probably advocating for a God that most people wouldn't want to believe in anyway.
Oh. This is something that went out. And it was put up, I think, on Reddit. And this was a text that went out to dear family and friends, and it involved the Christmas decorations at the Los Angeles Temple. So this went out on Saturday, I think it was. And it was a couple days before the wildfires. No, it was a couple days after the wildfires started, right? It says, dear family and friends, thanks to everyone who came out this past Saturday. That was the Saturday before the wildfire started. I think they started on Tuesday morning. To help take down and store the Christmas lights. Your efforts and cheerful spirits are much appreciated. Despite our great progress, we still have a bit more work to finish up. We actually only had 20 volunteers come and participate. We would greatly appreciate your help once more. We're planning to meet again next Saturday, January 11th, 2024 at 8 a.m. And with enough hands, we should wrap up quickly. Your help has been invaluable, and I hope you can join us again this coming weekend. And this was put up as an expression of a really bad look. And if you're going to be volunteering to do something in Los Angeles, then maybe it should be to help the people who are suffering from having their homes and businesses burned and being left without anything, instead of taking down some Christmas decorations at the temple. Your thoughts, Bill?
Can you imagine those 20 people who were willing to go to the LA temple to take down Christmas lights, but didn't have the ability to go do something else that would have been much more needed in trying to serve the community in terms of the fires?
Now, those 20 people, that's the Saturday before. So now they're calling up on the next Saturday for reinforcements, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, anything before the fires, I wouldn't judge that. Okay, you're the church, you're running your things. But the moment those fires hit,
Right.
every call to action should be getting food, shelter, and health care to the people affected by this travesty and getting people out who are in danger zones.
Can I express my surprise that the church temple district or whatever it is that they're getting these people from in order to take down the Christmas decoration can only get 20 volunteers out? What's going on? That seems really dismal as far as turnout goes.
Yeah.
All right. On the other hand, we want to be fair and balanced here. The church makes buildings available. This is a headline from a Deseret News article by Tad Walsh. Church makes buildings available for shelter, provides aid as California fires destroy members' homes. Hundreds of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have evacuated, and more than 24 families have lost homes to California wildfires. Here's what the church is doing. This is what we want you to know. Many Latter-day Saints have evacuated, and some have lost their homes to the raging California wildfires. Bill, could you take over? Could you read a bit there? Would that be okay?
Yep. So meanwhile, the headquarters of the Church of Jesus Christ has begun to provide emergency relief. About 1,000 church members evacuated and 30 families lost their homes, according to an update provided Friday evening by the church. Meeting houses of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have also been made available for community staging and shelter. The Bishop Central Storehouse in Salt Lake City and local Bishop storehouses in Southern California are providing emergency supplies. For example, the church delivered 1,500 cases of bottled water on Friday to the areas most impacted by the wildfires, according to the update. And like you're pointing out, this is great. And this is one of the very few times I've heard of in my entire life of LDS buildings being used for things like this. So it's a great move.
This is apocalyptic. I mean, this is beyond anything. And the handbook be damned at a time like this, I think. The handbook, which states you're not supposed to use church buildings for anything other than approved uses.
Yeah. So kudos to the church.
And there's a picture of the devastation after the fires. We even got an on-the-ground report from a listener last Friday on Mormonism After Dark. Bill and I were talking about the fires, of course, and we sort of expressed a wish that if anybody is listening to the show, they're on the ground there in LA, if you could send us a report. And that's what happened. We got a report from a listener on the ground of the LA fires. Here it goes. This is sent Saturday, January 11th, 2025 at 1:30 p.m. Subject was in LA for the fires. Dear Bill and RFM. Hey, Bill, could you read this first? I tell you what, let me read this first one, and then if we can alternate. Dear Bill and RFM, I was watching your Mormonism After Dark at the Salt Lake City airport. And you asked people, I hope it was up there on the big screen. Instead of CNN, I hope all the screens had Mormonism After Dark at the Salt Lake City airport. And you asked people to let you know what their experience had been in Los Angeles during the fires. I thought about messaging then, but I needed to board my plane. I thought I'd email you now instead. My name is Amanda Hendricks Komoto, and I am an associate professor of history at blank university in blank and direct the MA and PhD program for the department. By the way, I'm the one who redacted the university and where it's located. It was in the original email. I've been in communication with Amanda requesting her permission to use this, and she only asked that I delete that. The reason being not that she is ashamed of the university. In fact, she's quite proud of the university. The reason being that she would not want anybody in the university to make the mistake that she was using the university's name in order to buttress her opinions in this this essay that I'm reading, which makes sense to me. My area of focus is sexuality and religion in the American West. As you have probably guessed, most of my research focuses on Mormonism. I grew up in Southeast Idaho. My dad is an ex or Jack Mormon, depending on the day. Our earliest ancestors converted in upstate New York, but I was never baptized and only attended sacrament meeting when I was at my grandma's house.
I had a month-long fellowship at the Huntington Library in San Marino, California this year to conduct research on Ina Coolbrith, Joseph Smith's niece. After Joseph's death, she moved with her mother, Agnes Coolbrith, to California, where she became the state's first poet laureate. She was initially known as the Mormon poetess, but hid her Mormonism after a disastrous first marriage. Her circle of close friends includes Mary Austin, Jack London, and Mark Twain. John Muir, the famous conservationist, was a pallbearer at her mother's funeral. The Huntington also has the Mormon file, several dozen documents and manuscripts that Juanita Brooks put together and had donated to the library, but I didn't use that collection.
I absolutely love this essay and the stuff I'm learning from it. I had never heard of Ina Coolbrith before, and I find out now that the first poet laureate of the state of California was Joseph Smith's niece. And who says there's nothing in heredity? A few days ago, we got an alert that the strength of the Santa Ana winds was expected to reach hurricane force and could be life-threatening. At first, I thought they were exaggerating, as the wind was nothing more than a light breeze. I even called a friend who had grown up in nearby Alhambra to ask him if Californians often over-exaggerated the wind strength. By that night, however, they were pounding on the windows, and a fire had broken out in the Palisades. I had dinner at a small Mexican restaurant and watched as people fled their cars. Within a few hours, there was also a fire in nearby Eaton Canyon. The apartment I was renting ended up being 1/2 mile away from the evacuation zone. That's not far. Some of the other Huntington fellows were in the evacuation zone, and some of the staff lost their homes in the fire. Because I wasn't in the evacuation zone, the days I spent there were ones of uncertainty. There was ash lightly falling from the sky like snow. I had been told by a retired professor there that I was likely safe, as the fire would have to cross the 210, a 12-lane freeway, to get to me. I had also heard, though, that the winds were carrying sparks up to 3 miles. I still don't know if that was true.
After a day of sitting by myself in a small bedroom, I was living in a dorm-like situation. I decided to venture out and survey the damage. There were piles of tinder everywhere. The Santa Anas had blown down all of the dead pine needles from the trees and stripped the palm trees of their bark. Some of the piles were waist high. My throat also ached from the smoke and my eyes were burning. Although I felt safe at the moment, I knew a single spark could set off pine needles and palm trees. The fire was still 0% contained at that moment. I frequently received text and phone calls from people I knew in town asking if I needed somewhere to stay and telling me that they would come get me if necessary, since I didn't have a car. I didn't ask any of them to come get me, partially because some would be driving past other large fires to get to me. All of the Altadena and Pacific Palisades were already gone.
Throughout all of this, we got emails from the Huntington Library telling us they were taking it day by day and would let us know that night if they would reopen the following day. I felt obligated to stay in case they reopened. On Wednesday, they let us know they wouldn't be reopening for the rest of the week. My required residency ended on Friday, so I decided to leave. I booked a flight for Thursday. That night, I saw a car hit a Chihuahua as I was walking. That's so sad. On the bright side, it was a Chihuahua. The driver was a college student trying to evacuate. I'll never hear the end of that one, I know. The driver was a college student trying to evacuate. He stopped and we found the dog together and alerted the homeowners where the dog was hiding. It wasn't their dog. But we contacted the Humane Society, got the dog some water, and the homeowner, roughly 60 years old and in tears about the dog's injuries, and his son told us to go and they would care for the dog until someone came. The Humane Society told us they couldn't say when they could get there as they were overwhelmed with calls, I'm sure. This just sounds absolutely crazy. On Thursday morning, I went to the airport. It was emptier than normal. While we were waiting for the flight, an alarm went off telling us an evacuation warning had been issued for our area. Did you hear about this, Bill? She's at the airport, and all of a sudden, an alarm goes off telling us that an evacuation warning has been issued for our area. My heart stopped. The city sent a message a few minutes later telling us, oh, just kidding. It was a false alarm. Those have continued to go off periodically. That wasn't the only one. In one case, a false alarm came at 3 o'clock in the morning. I eventually boarded the flight. A man on the flight was disruptive. He had brought a pet to the airport and was told it couldn't board the flight because he hadn't bought it a ticket. They gave him a choice to buy a ticket for the pet and get on a different flight or take this one. He chose to take our flight, but refused to buckle his seatbelt. I guess that's just a way of protesting. The Delta flight attendant was amazing. He talked him down, and the man finally buckled his seatbelt. After we took off, the flight was bumpy. The cabin was hot because of the wildfires, and you could smell smoke. Imagine the cabin being hot because of the fires. There was also a mommy blogger behind me who insisted on recording a video for Instagram and narrating it like it was doomsday. The city engulfed in flames, and we are lucky to be on the last flight out. When we reached 10,000 feet, people's phones began giving them the evacuation orders, public health warnings, etc. they had missed. I didn't know what they were, so I assumed it was a fire alarm from the smoke in the cabin. Oh, I'm sorry, Bill. I think I took your slide.
Okay. They're your slides, so that's okay. When we landed, I was never so glad to see Salt Lake City. I ended up having to stay the night because there was too much fog in blank, so she left that out as well. Yeah, you did.
Request.
Yes, for a plane to land safely. So I went to the church history library to do some research. I saw your podcast for about 10 to 15 minutes while waiting for my flight that night. After the experience, I've been thinking about Ina's life. She lost her house and all of her manuscripts, an autobiography, first editions of Mark Twain's books, her correspondence with Twain, John Greenleaf Whittier, etc., in the fire, as well as 2 Japanese sparrows.
By the way, this is the 1906 San Francisco fire caused by the earthquake that she's talking about.
She was able to save her 2 white Angora cats. On a side note, Ansel Adams took photographs of these cats. We have images of them as a result. They found her sitting in the rubble in shock with just her cats and a bag of her things. She mourned the loss of her trees and her plants, her home and her city. She was an early environmentalist and only wrote nature poetry, so the loss of non-human life and human life hit her hard.
Yeah. By the way, here's a picture of her on the right, and on the left, that is a picture of people on the hillside watching San Francisco burn in 1906.
Just FYI, here's a picture of Ina Coolbrith when she was older.
Yes.
So there's that.
Thank you. I've got a couple here too as well with the cat or cats. I'm not sure if it's 1 or 2. I think Amanda had mentioned 2. I found out that the name of at least one was Popcorn. And there she is. And in her older years as well. Okay. So let's see if there's anything left to this. Oh, yes. Excuse me. She continues and concludes, I know people who lost their homes in the fire and met more on the plane. No one on the Mormon history community or no one in the Mormon history community is talking about this, but the entire archives for the National Theosophical Society burned down in Altadena. I included a screenshot that lists the things we lost in the flames. I don't have anything meaningful or profound to say, but an interesting read is Francisca Reina. I was reading it before the fires broke out, so it's been in my head. Some of Ina Coolbrith's friends published it after the fire in hopes of fundraising money to give her a house. It's a series of poems about the experience of being a refugee from the fire and a promise that the city will rebuild. Ina gave a copy to her nurse caretaker who helped her escape the flames. I hope all is well. Best, Amanda. And there in the bottom, there's it's not a photograph, I think it's a painting of this theosophical, school, which apparently is no longer there, and the library inside of it has been destroyed. Can you read this? This was posted somewhere, and Amanda had sent this along as well.
Yep. Horrible, deeply dramatic news for anybody who cares about the preservation of the Theosophical heritage. I was just told the entire property of the Theosophical Society in Altadena, near Pasadena, has been completely destroyed by the fire in Los Angeles. This was the world's largest archive of Theosophical materials, including a library with 40,000 titles. The entire archive of the history of the Theosophical Society, including CA 10,000 unpublished letters
I
pertaining.
think it would be about circa.
Gotcha. And then pertaining to HPB.
Can't help you.
Yeah. The Mahatamus, WQ Judge, GRS Mead, Catherine Tingley, and G. Dave Perucker.
Yeah. If we're HPL, I might be able to help you.
Membership records since 1875, art objects, and countless other irreplaceable materials. The archives also contained works of Bohm, Gichtel, donations from the King of Siam, including rare Buddhist scriptures, and so on, with thanks to Renaud Spank for the information. This is obviously just one part of an even much larger drama that is currently unfolding, but one that deals a devastating blow to the modern study of esotericism and of modern theosophy. More in particular, it is hard to fathom, but it seems to be true.
So there are all kinds of devastations going on in Los Angeles. And of course, we would put human life at the top of that, human homes next. Absolutely. But it's beyond belief what's being destroyed there.
But thank goodness for thoughts and prayers, the temple's still there.
Yes. Those Masonic rituals must be preserved.
Yep.
Okay. And so I've got something else to talk about too. Elder Holland goes all in. I mean, all in the boat, the love boat. This is what we're talking about. A recently released video by Elder Holland from, I think, a couple of days ago called Stay in the Boat. Had 31,000 views as of this afternoon. It's probably above that by now. You can see it's only 5 minutes long. It features an interview with Elder Oaks, and then there are cutaways to different scenes from this particular church video, but it's getting very popular. Now, you'll remember that Elder Holland did not start this phrase, stay in the boat. That was Elder Ballard. Elder Ballard started the phrase, stay in the boat. He liked it so much, he mentioned it in the second general conference. Elder Holland was envious, but he knew that if he talked about stay in the boat, he would be seen as plagiarizing Elder Ballard. He couldn't stand the thought, so he changed it to not stay in the boat, but stay in the choir. And he gave an excellent conference talk called Stay in the Choir. But now that Elder Ballard has left the scene and is beyond the pale, now I think he can come forward and claim this idea as his own. Stay in the boat, says Elder Ballard. Now, it's very interesting. First off, look at this guy who's right behind Jesus. It looks like he's kind of out of breath. He's been rowing really hard. This guy right here. Okay, now, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's Jacob Hansen with a beard, isn't it? Same insipid Jacob Hansen look, you got to admit. Okay. Continuing with the news. Here's the first 58 seconds of this video.
We were talking about people who have difficult lives or troubles that come, but we all do. Everybody does. Don't abandon the ship when the waves are a little high. That's when you tie yourself in and get the life jacket on and you hold on to an oar and you don't move. The worst thing you could do is to leave the protection of the boat you're in this case, the gospel of Jesus Christ, and not assume that the first time there's trouble, that God hates me, or God doesn't love me, or he doesn't answer my prayers. I want to be careful because I don't want to insult anybody, but it's foolish.
Yeah, I don't want to insult anybody, but you're idiots. That was pretty good. So I thought this was very interesting, this first part, okay, because he's saying stay in the boat. And there are a number of people who have quite accurately responded that the main place where a boat is talked about in the New Testament and in the Gospels is where Jesus is outside the boat. He's walking on the water. He's telling his chief apostle, Peter, get out of the boat. Come and walk to me. That's the directive that Peter gives to his, Jesus gives to his chief apostle, is to get out of the boat. There are those who have mentioned it before, okay? What is amazing to me is that this glaring problem with this analogy is being used to illustrate the analogy itself. In other words, they're using video of Jesus in the boat, in the storm, reaching out to Peter. No, he will come to him in a second. Right now, he's in the boat. There's two stories in the New Testament, okay, that have to do with Jesus' boat storm. And the one is that he's in the boat the whole time and he's asleep. And it's Master, the tempest is raging. And he wakes up and then he calms the storm. He's not outside the boat in that story. What is almost certainly a variation of the same story, and probably more famous, is where he's left behind and the apostles start rowing. And then I think it's all stormy. The main thing is that Jesus comes walking on the water. He's not in the boat asleep in this one. He comes walking on the water and everybody's going, oh my gosh. And Jesus reaches out to Peter and says, come to me. And then Peter comes out and walks on the water. That's the one. So what I was wondering was when I saw that they were illustrating this with scenes from a storm and Jesus in a boat, are they going to use the one that's safe, the first version, or would they actually use the second version where Peter reaches out to Jesus and leaves the boat at Jesus's command? That was the question. And the amazing thing is that they use the second one. I'm not sure if we've seen that yet. Did we see that here?
Or you want
to go back just about to the 30-second mark?
Give me a second here. You want to go back to the original clip we just showed?
Yes, please. Just the 30-second mark in to this whole thing. But I think that this one right here, I think that's probably from the first version of the story where he doesn't come walking to it. But then it shifts. And then there's a place where obviously Jesus is walking on the water.
Jacket on and you hold on to an oar and you don't move. The worst thing you could do is to leave the protection of the boat you're in this case, the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Right there.
Right
there, stop. This is just amazing. Right when Elder Holland is saying the worst thing you could do is leave the boat that you're in this case, the gospel of Jesus Christ. The visual that is playing is Jesus standing on the water, and he's looking at Peter, and Peter's going to be leaving the boat because Jesus is going to tell Peter, get out of the boat. Is this a coincidence?
It is a strange thing. It's like on one hand, you're giving, there used to be an old Saturday Night Live skit where Kevin, I forget what Kevin's last name was, but the tall guy.
Kevin Nielsen? Nyland?
Yes, but Kevin always did this skit of subliminal advertising. And so he would be talking to somebody and he would throw little things in that were hard to catch. But over the course of the comedic skit, you could tell he was manipulating the person to do something different. This is sort of that, where you're saying one thing with your mouth, but what you're showing everyone is get the hell out of the boat. Get the hell out of the boat. Come out of the boat now. You don't have to even worry about swimming. You can walk on water. Get the hell off that boat.
And what we all know is this is a story that is designed to illustrate that staying in the boat is safe, but it stagnates you. You cannot grow. You can row, but you can't grow while you're in the boat. You have to take a step of faith. And that faith is what gets you out of the boat, not keeps you in the boat.
The only other thing I'll say here is I think I was telling you before the show started, I think this is just a really bad analogy. people leave the boat for lots of reasons. And if you really listen to the people and let them speak for themselves and tell their sacred stories, what they say is the boat was hurting me. The boat was lying to me. The boat wasn't safe. It was hurting my family. It was hurting me.
It's like my mother, the boat.
Yeah. So you'd have to have an analogy where the boat is, as you pointed out before the show, is sinking, where the elements of the boat are toxic, and where the boat has changed its parts so quickly, which Mormonism has, that you don't trust the integrity of the ship. And in those reasons, land is close by. You've got your life jacket on. You've got the tools to make it. And it's much safer 100 yards away where that beautiful island is.
And the amazing thing is, if you jump off, you can actually stand up in the water.
You don't know it.
You don't know it. Wade to the shore. It's cool.
Yeah, the ship's captain is telling you that you'll drown, but if you jump out, it's only knee deep.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the secret. That's the secret the captain doesn't want you to know. So, having said that, now, where is this? Is this the next slide?
No. So you're looking for that one.
Yes, because Bill and I think especially Bill, has talked about this subject, about the church's changing its tune about whether Mormons get their own planet. And we've talked about this before. This is from the Church of Jesus Christ. It's their own webpage. That's the top half of this slide. That's why it looks smaller. It's because it is. But that's to show where this comes from the newsroom. Frequently asked questions. I got this today. It is still there. Number 12. Do Latter-day Saints believe that they will get their own planet? Answer, no, period. This idea is not taught in Latter-day Saint scripture, nor is it a doctrine of the church. This misunderstanding stems from speculative comments, unreflective of scriptural doctrine, okay? And we've gone through this and showed how even in manuals that the church has and talks the church has and general conference talks the church has on its website now, saying exactly the opposite. This is the message the church wants to put out to the public for whatever reason. Obviously, because they're embarrassed of what it is they actually believe. Okay. I think we did a whole episode on that.
By the way,
yes?
By the way, LDS Church, which speculative comments? Because the only way I can judge the degree of dishonesty, you're dishonest no matter what in this issue. But the way in which I can judge the degree of which you're being dishonest is for you to provide me the speculative comments that come from, I'm assuming you're speaking leaders, because that's sort of where you always go to in terms of saying, like, those were just leaders who gave their opinions. I'd like to know what those speculative comments are. So if you could include a footnote in the future on this webpage, that would be very helpful to those of us who are trying to understand where you actually stand.
I'm sure they will get right on that, Mr. Reel. It's a good idea, though. Mm-hmm. Now, here's where Elder Holland, this is why Martine sent this to me. I had seen this thumbnail come up in my feed, but I didn't look at it. But Martine says, you got to see this, because listen to what Elder Holland says, and he gives away the whole game on the planet thing.
We believe that we are gods in embryo. We teach that. We believe that because it's in the scriptures. But how does that happen? What's the mechanics of that? On the morning of the first resurrection, does the coffin open and somebody jumps out and says, I'm here, Lord, give me a universe? Well, I don't think so. I think, like everything else, it's line upon line and precept upon precept. We get to practice.
It is line upon line and planet upon planet. We don't get our universe all at once, Bill. It's line upon line, precept upon precept. Well, if we don't get our universe all at once, but at some point we do get our universe, and there's planets in the universe, then you know what? At some point, we get a freaking planet.
Is this a lease? Is this a lease to own kind of setup? In other words, the universe I own, but the planets I have to lease for 60 months and put 20% down. What's the interest rate? I need to know these things, because if you're saying I get a universe, but I don't get any planets, somebody's bullshitting us.
Isn't that amazing? It's absolutely amazing. And this is the problem. Sometimes we look at it, oh, what a great thing that we've got 15 apostles on the earth, 15 prophets, seers, and revelators. And then you end up finding out that there's a huge downside to this. And that is, my dad would have said there's too many chiefs and not enough Indians. I think today we would say there's too many chefs and not enough cooks, right? Everybody's got their own freaking ideas. And they're like headless chickens running around across the hen yard and bumping into each other and going all sorts of different directions. You got Elder Bednar over here radically redefining free agency as moral agency, which is the opposite of agency. And you've got Elder Holland, bless his heart, over there accidentally telling the truth about what the church teaches when the people who are in charge of the newsroom are out there trying to make sure the outside world doesn't know what the church actually teaches about planets and universes.
At the very least, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing.
Absolutely not. By the way, Rebecca Biblioteca, she just texted me something, and I can't see the text because I don't have my phone with me. If you could, like, I don't know, what can you do? Can you send it in the private chat or something?
She could come into StreamYard and send it in the private chat if she wanted. Yeah, that would work.
How about that? Okay. Sorry about that. I just gotta get a message to you.
Boy, oh boy. So
I'm sorry, because all I have is this phone, and the phone can show me that I'm getting a text, but it is the dickens to try and read a text off this phone, I've got to tell you.
You mean watch, right?
I do mean that. What have I been saying, phone? I have been saying phone because
That's all
my
right.
watch has been a phone for so long.
Okay. By the way, just a note, this also destroys the argument that the church is trying to answer a different question in the Mormon newsroom, because the statement Elder Holland makes is in the exact same articulation that the newsroom is trying to report as being false. In other words, if you want to make the argument that the newsroom is distinguishing between getting your own planet and having a planet, you having to make your own planet, Elder Holland just said you get your own universe, and you actually do, but you have to do it line upon line, precept upon precept, and work your way there by practicing.
That's why the whole universe is divided up into solar systems, and then there's galaxies, because there's different gods ruling over these things of different ages.
Yeah. Yep. Sorry,
Nick
Elder.
will know that.
You got caught with your hand in the cookie jar.
Yes. So that was that. And thank you, Martine, for making me watch that this morning. And I found it quite interesting. I hope everybody else did too.
All right.
And she also wanted to send me this to make sure it was really clear. This is on the church news. Okay. Which means that once again, the church is teaching two things out of its mouth, one out of each side of its mouth. So this one goes up there in contradistinction to number 12 on the frequently asked questions on the church newsroom website.
Ooh. How can one figure out what the doctrines of the church are if the church itself, led by prophets, seers, and revelators, can't figure out what the doctrines of the church are?
That is the beauty of it.
I smell apostasy, maybe even a great apostasy.
Well, this is all about deniable plausibility, you understand.
Of course, but it's still, one is not truthful and the church is claiming both.
I know, but they've got 15 guys, right? So they can appeal to various parts of their audience, their membership, so everybody gets to hear something that they like.
You can't blame them. They've changed so much. It's really hard to sort of stay on top of all of it and keep it all sort of coherent inside your head. And I'll just note that the people reading the LDS newsroom and the people watching this video are, as you put it, two very different audiences.
Right. And I will try and make the obvious comparison. It makes sense to be in their position to have a number of people holding these offices, different people of which can appeal to different factions of their base. That all makes sense. The problem is when you compare it with what the church claims to be and what the membership who cares about this believes the church to be, which is the true restored church of Jesus Christ, led by his apostles and prophets, and they speak for Jesus. So they should be teaching us with a unified voice the one truth that is the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's the way it should be if the church were what it claimed to be.
Yeah. Why would you trust grown men who seem completely unable to discern the truth, so that so many doctrines have changed? Some are being taught at the same time a contradiction is, and so many things have been abandoned. I don't know.
Yeah. So there was that. And then I put this in there because this is for Elder Holland. Oops, I did it again.
Oops, I did it again. Yep. Little Britney Spears, I think. I think that's where
See,
that comes from.
you would know the tune to that. I would not have known that.
Yeah, I'm a big Britney Spears and Hannah Montana fan.
Yeah. Me, BGs, I can do.
There we go.
And then I'm handing it off to you, Bill.
All right, really quick. American Primeval, fact or fiction? I just wanted to give people, I saw 2 articles. I'll show those. People magazine came out with an article, Is American Primeval a True Story? All about the deadly Utah massacre that inspired the Netflix miniseries. And then Forbes magazine, or Forbes online website, did an article, Is Netflix's American Primeval based on a true story? What's fact versus fiction? It's a 6-part miniseries. I have finished the first 3 parts. I will say as kind of on the outside, watching it was phenomenal to me. I think the acting is phenomenal. I think the script is phenomenal.
Really?
I think there's a lot of violence. I don't think we'll get into this. I don't think it matches the history super well. But they'll sort of admit to that here. So, RFM, what were you wanting to say?
It's supposed to be a documentary? I mean, it's not supposed to, right?
It's just a TV show based on historical events.
It's like Mormons will be like anybody else. They'll go to a movie that's based on a true story, and they're fine with, creative license, right, being made to condense the story, to tell it effectively, blah, blah, blah.
By the way,
man, when it comes to Mormon shit, no, you got to tell it not only the way it happened, you got to tell it the way I believe it happened. Otherwise, forget about it.
By the way, every church-made film around historical events is telling the story in a way that doesn't match the actual documented history of the event.
Yes.
Okay. So, please.
Mormonism and history are like this. Mormonism's the one over here.
All right. So 2 articles talking about whether this is a historically accurate film. By the way, it sounded like when you made a noise as if you had watched some of this.
No,
show.
I have not, but I want to. I've been yeah.
It's violent and it's intense, and it is non-stop intense.
Really? Wow.
Yes. So
can you imagine somebody making Mormonism interesting? I think you should get an award just for that.
Yeah. And the film isn't about Mormons. It's about multiple groups, 4 of them, in fact, U.S. military and government, Native Americans, the Mormons, and the people who are trying to go west in wagon companies of one sort or another.
On the Oregon Trail. So
here's what I've got. Yes, American Primeval is based on true events. And this is Berg is one of the executive producer of the TV show. He told, and that's whoever was representing the article that Emily Blackwood wrote here for people, that he first found inspiration for the series in 2020 after reading about the Utah War. Though many of the show's characters and their narratives are fictionalized, the 1857 Mountain Meadows Massacre inspired the attack that's depicted in the first episode. So this is not
so that's why it starts off with that, huh?
Yeah, this is not a film about Mountain Meadows. This is a film about Western expansion, the groups that were in conflict with each other, and the historical events that show up in the show are based loosely on actual historical events that occurred. So I'll just note here, this is a map of the common trail that was used. That's the big picture. If I zoom in, you'll see Fort Bridger right there, a little bit to the left of the middle, Millersburg, then Fort Bridger. Fort Bridger, you can see the big, the blue lines that are distinguishing states. Fort Bridger was actually in the southwest corner of Wyoming, but that's the Utah Territory. So one of me and my girlfriend are watching this show now. We're 3 episodes through. We got 3 to go. It's a 6-part series. And she's noticing, she's not a historical buff like me, but she's quickly noticing that lots of things that she has an information in her head about these events are being portrayed as if they're right next door to each other. So the TV show, American Primeval, seems to be covering sort of the Utah territory and treats it as if somebody in the southwest corner of Wyoming is sort of up to date on what's happening in southern Utah. If you're considering the attack in the beginning to be representative of Mountain Meadows, for instance. So if you think of the show as covering sort of all of the Utah territory, that'll make sense. It's important to note that Fort Bridger was in the Utah territory. You'll see the little map there in the middle, far right, with a little dot. It's in Wyoming, but it was part of the original Utah territory. You can see there in the Wikipedia article, the territory of Utah. It talks about what it included, and it says, and the extreme southwest corner of present-day Wyoming. And if you look up Fort Bridger on Wikipedia, it says that it was originally inside the Utah territory. Okay.
You know what helped me start actually being able to appreciate non-church produced Mormon media? Recognizing that not everything has to be a freaking missionary opportunity.
Right. Just tell a good movie. And what the movie does convey is the sort of psychology of alpha males of various groups. Jim Bridger trying to run his fort, Brigham Young trying to keep the U.S. government away, the leaders within the U.S. military who are questioning Brigham Young, the government trying to put Brigham in his place, and these tough, adventurous folks taking risk to go west and to take on the challenges that you and I would be scared to death to encounter in today's world. And all of that plays out so well on the TV set for this show.
Stake your claim, my boy.
Yes.
There's land out there.
Yes. And that was the thing I got from this. Watching this, I thought, man, every one of these human beings took on risk and overcoming fears of things, because not that these things happened every day, but you were at risk of being killed by the Native Americans. You were at risk of being bullied by the Mormons if you ran to the wrong part of town. And Latter-day Saints don't get a very good feel for what Utah Mormonism in its early days was, or at least likely was. I think watching this film helps you see how the Mormons would have to handle sort of the U.S. Army and U.S. government and the tenseness and how you need really strong authoritarian leaders, but those are generally not healthy men. Anyway, okay, which characters in American Primeval are real? Jim Bridger was a real-life pioneer caught between warring factions after transforming Fort Bridger into a small city on the frontier. Brigham Young, the leader of the Mormon Church at the time, commanded his army, known as the Nauvoo Legion. And Wild Bill Hickman was a notorious lawman and a member of this militia.
Why is it that you're bringing this information up? I've seen a few places where it sounds like the apologetic response, they feel like this needs a response of some sort. You're going to have a movie, so I have to apologetically respond because I am perceiving this as an attack on the church, right? Because that's what apologists do. So there are at least one, maybe more, podcast out right now trying to talk about all the things that American Primeval gets wrong about Mormonism. Is that where this is coming from?
No, but notice those same voices will not inform you everything that Mormonism gets wrong about Mormonism. Notice their bias. Okay. No, the reason I'm doing this is because it would have helped me as I began to watch the show to know some of these data points, to know this wasn't a show about Mountain Meadows Massacre. It includes a battle, a violent excursion that is based loosely in part on the Mountain Meadows Massacre. That would have been helpful to me, because at first I couldn't make sense of like what was going on because it wasn't the history I understood.
But it is the Mormons, right?
It is the Mormons, for sure. And I think Mormons are portrayed very well in this. So
does the fictionalized way in which it's portrayed make Brigham Young more involved?
I don't want to say yes yet. What I will say is Brigham comes across as being very much in charge of his people, which makes a lot of sense to me. He is much closer in conversation with the other groups than what would be the historical reality.
Aha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So
I could see a legitimate reason to be a bit miffed if I were a TBM.
Yeah. Jim Bridger, Brigham Young, Wild Bill Hickman are characters in the TV show based on real people. Mountain Meadows Massacre. They essentially, I'm gonna go back here. They essentially say that the massacre and its aftermath would make good subject for a longer treatment, but that making that project would be a dicey choice given the politics around the history, and also nobody would want to watch the result because it would be too awful. That's how bad Mountain Meadows was. And this TV show is extremely violent. The 2007 movie September Dawn with Jon Voight tried this, but was awful for different reasons. While in 2022 miniseries Under the Banner of Heaven, the massacre is a B plot in the finale. Berg and Smith try to solve the problem by diluting the massacre's violence and spreading it around across plot lines until it seems to be everywhere. In their version, instead of being drawn out over days of a siege like the actual attack, the attack in the TV show comes quickly, out of the blue, with one female immigrant cut off in the midst of small talk by an arrow to the forehead. Yes, we see many people dying, and it's intense, but because we're following the point of a view of the fictional character Sarah, who escapes, we don't spend that much time in the scene itself, and you don't get to see all those older than 6 immigrant kids get killed. You do see one child die. The Mormon who kills the little boy immediately rips off his hood and throws up. In the show, the Mormon attackers let a group of women live and give them to their Native American collaborators as captives. Historically, no women were allowed to escape the violence. By the way, 120 people, I believe, were killed in the actual Mountain Meadows massacre, and only, I think, 17 children were allowed to live, and they were all at the age of 6 or under, for just to note. This is the gentleman who plays Brigham Young.
And it wasn't because they were innocent, according to Mormon doctrine, as much as it was that they couldn't identify the perpetrators.
Yes. And then the clothes of their parents were taken by the Mormons. And so the kids would be raised in the same community as their killers and watch people in the town trounce around in their dead parents' clothing.
Well, hopefully if they were that small and that was the reason, then they wouldn't recognize that.
Yeah. The gentleman who plays Brigham Young, I think it does a fantastic job of conveying how tough of a leader Brigham would have to be to manage all of the things that are going on around him and to put off the sort of persona that would have his people trusting him as the prophet and to lead them out of this mess. So I think that comes across really well. Just a note, is Fort Bridger a real place? Yes. Fort Bridger is a real place. On November 18th, 1857, Bridger leased his surveyed land to the United States, though payment was withheld until Bridger could establish title. I'll just note, Brigham Young is alleged to have purchased, at least paid the down payment on the fort around 1854 and 1855. He claims he had, I forget what the other founder of the fort is, but Bridger was only one of the 2 people who started the trading post. And I'll show you a picture of the trading post, kind of cool. Young and the Mormon Church claimed that they had bought the fort, but Bridger was away at the time. Meanwhile, somebody signed his name and signed the other guy's name and claimed to have power of attorney, but Bridger refuted that.
It sounds like the second Watson letter.
It is. And I will say this, except these are, I think, at least historical facts, if not facts. And then Brigham Young and the Mormons actually burned down. This is a true thing. They burned down 1857. The Mormons set fire to the Fort Bridger buildings. Meanwhile, the military leader Johnston kept his supplies of the garrison within the stone walls, which remained, while an army wintered at Camp Scott nearby. The Mormons believe they owned the camp. The military wanted the camp because it was a great way station to be able to have their defense against the Mormons. The camp was then held by the U.S. military until, guess what year, RFM?
1857?
1890.
I'm so sorry. I was looking at something earlier. What were you asking?
No, you're good. It's 1890. The U.S. military finally gives up Fort Bridger. Why? Because the manifesto happens and the military no longer has a beef with the Mormons.
Right. Very good.
Okay, so here's a picture of Fort Bridger. Not today. I don't think that this might be there today, but the original fort has been destroyed and maybe rebuilt. But this was a historical video that was trying to explain to the audience what the fort would have looked like. And so this was the image on that video. And this is pretty accurate. If you read what is written about the fort, this is how it's described. 2 log buildings. And this was started off as just a trading post that Jim Bridger and his cohort built together with help, obviously, to be just a trading fort along the path west. And it ends up being a fort for military and Mormon occupation at various points.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. Of course, just how vital an area, a building, a structure like this is, because not only is it a structure, but because you've got stuff there that you need. So yeah, it's not like a 7-Eleven where they're every other block.
Yes, this would be the place you had to stop at to resupply in order to take your journey continuing west.
Yeah.
If you miss this place, you were SOL.
Right.
Okay.
So location.
Was James Woolsey a real person? So if anybody's watching the show, you'll notice the guy on the right. They were told that this character is a fictional character, but is based on a real LDS member who was executed for participating in Mountain Meadows Massacre. That could only be one person, because only one person took the fall for Mountain Meadows Massacre, and that would be good old John D. Lee.
That's when Matt Kennedy writes, one such man was John D. Lee. He tips his cards that he doesn't know the subject as well as I do.
No.
He wasn't one such man. He was the only man who got executed for participating in the Mountain Meadows Massacre.
There's your scapegoat, everybody. John D. Lee. All right. And then
like Walter Brennan there.
Yeah. And so if folks will just recognize, by the way, show's great. Said that plenty of times. Go see it. I think you'll like it if you don't mind a lot of violence.
And that's on Netflix. Is that correct?
Netflix. And I'll just say at the end, don't expect history. Expect some connections to history, but just enjoy it as a great TV show that helps you see the mentality of people who took on the wild frontier.
Yeah, back in the 60s, they did a big movie called How the West Was Won. It was kind of like this. Had all the big names in Hollywood in it. And what was it? Is it Cinerama? No, it was whatever that thing was. That the curved screen. It was big.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. Maybe this is what Rebecca was texting me about, because she still hasn't gotten to me by private chat that I can see. But to remind me not to forget this, and I wasn't going to forget this, that this is the promo for Mormonish for tomorrow evening, 6:00 p.m. That's Mountain Time, I believe. Book of Mormon clickbait. It got you with Ganesh Cherian. That should be a lot of fun. And Ganesh is going to be on our show talking about something completely different and even more interesting, much more interesting than what he's going to be talking about on Mormonish. So on Wednesday at 6:20 p.m. Mountain Time, we'll have Ganesh Cherian on the show talking about some of the remarkable insights he has gained as he's read the Book of Mormon over the last year, I think it is, or so. He's got so much stuff to talk about. He had all these different categories, and I said, yeah, I love them all. We can't do them all. Let's do like 3 or 4. So let's do these. So that's what we're going to talk about. And we're still going to fight against going over long on Wednesday night, but it's going to be brilliant. Also, check out Mormonish tomorrow night.
Okay, I'm only pausing for a second because Rebecca is telling me to check my Facebook Messenger. She just says, if you get a chance, show the just released rendering of the Belgium temple. It has a micro steeple. So it's
a microphallic temple?
Here we go.
Oh my God, that's embarrassing.
Let me open that back up.
Is that really the steeple?
This is the steeple. Steeple size matters, RFM. It points us to heaven. I
can hardly see that steeple.
You'd almost have to, I don't know.
There was shrinkage.
Yeah, there was shrinkage, George Costanza. There was shrinkage.
Wait a second. Oh, now somebody else is saying something. Everybody wants to have him. I'm sorry, I can't read it. I apologize.
Wow.
Maybe they may not even know I'm on a show right now. It's not like the entire world watches, only half the world, the civilized half of the world, by the way.
The Belgium Temple microsteeple.
Mm-hmm. Microphallic.
So there's that.
Thank you, Rebecca. Even though you're far away, we still sense your presence.
And then what do we have going this week for Mormonism Live on Wednesday?
That's the Ganesh one.
Yes.
Ganesh Charian, where what we're going to talk about on Wednesday is 3 times better than what he's going to be talking about with Mormonish on Tuesday. It's actually all going to be wonderful. It's going to be wonderful. And he's going to be great tomorrow. He's just going to be a little bit better on Wednesday. That's all I'm saying. Okay. So Ganesh is going to be doing double duty tomorrow, Tuesday, 6:00 p.m. Mountain Time on Mormonish. And he's going to be even better on Wednesday, talking about something completely unrelated and even more fascinating at 6:20 p.m. on Mormonism Live, Mountain Time.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm glad Rebecca's taking this in the way it's intended.
And then, folks, join us for Mormonism After Dark on Friday at 8 p.m. Mountain Time, where you'll have, I think, a few more laughs, a little more off-the-cuff conversation, and a little bit more of a relaxed atmosphere.
Bill, I've got to tell you, maybe I'll mention it then. I'm sorry, it was Amanda Komodo, and I can't remember districts. Komodo. She's watching Mormonism After Dark. We got classy people hanging around the joint.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Who knew?
Crazy stuff.
I think that's amazing.
Yep. And so that's all that I've got. Anything else? I'll turn it back to you, my friend.
That is it. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here at the Mormon Newscast. Please join us next Monday, same time, 6:00 p.m. Mountain Time, for another exciting and entertaining episode of the Mormon Newscast. And hopefully, prayers and thoughts going out to Rebecca Biblioteca. She'll be with us in 1 week's time. Good night, everybody.
Dieter Elkdorf here. That's a wrap for this week's flight of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you flying first class with us and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast. Doubt your doubts.